Hey guys, and welcome to Petrol Ped, and welcome to the headquarters of Porsche GB, where I've just picked up this, the key to the new Porsche 718 Spyder, a car I've wanted to get behind the wheel of for a very long time, and I cannot wait to experience it and share it with you guys. I have a feeling the next couple of days are going to be rather special. Now, when I was planning this video, I thought, where am I going to start? Where do I even start to review and think about this car? It's a beautiful, beautiful thing to look at, a stunning piece of engineering, and there are plenty of good things to talk about, that's for sure. But this Spyder format for the Boxster, although this is now no longer called a Boxster, this is a 718 Spyder. Porsche are very specific about that. But it's this rear deck and these iconic flying buttresses to the canvas folding roof. But I'm going to start with one of the few things I really don't like about the car, and probably something that would drive me mad if I owned it, and that is dropping the roof. We are so used to canvas folding roofs being able to be, dropped at speeds of up to 20 or 30 miles an hour. Not with this car. Although, to start with, you think it might be the case. Let's have a look inside. Now let's try not to get distracted by the most beautiful interior of a car I've had in a long time. It is gorgeous in here, but I'll talk more about that very shortly. So the control you want is in the middle here. There is the kind of drop and raise the roof button, saying, excellent. Now what I'll probably need to do is put some keys in the ignition. Just fire it. You have an actual key, not a starter button, so I'm just going to do that. And then now, all that's done is it's dropped the windows about an inch, it's removed the little latch here, and it's raised the rear deck lid. Everything else from now on is a manual process. And we start with unclipping the buttresses. Now we have to unclip these little buttresses, and there's a little place up here to clip them in. It's quite neat. There's kind of no obvious latch. You have to feel around in the canvas, and you can feel a little push button and then clip it, and then it just mounts into a little recess, a little hole just here. And that's kind of the canvas bit done. And then the next bit you've got to do is lift the boot deck. Now interestingly, this is also part of your storage. So in here there's 120 litres of storage. And then the final thing you need to do, you don't have any of these motors or mechanisms or anything, you literally do that and make sure it's nice and firm down. And then you close the lid. And then the last little bit is you've got these little wing things on either side that just drop down. Now, the finished thing is a thing to behold. These speed bumps behind the driver and the passenger are beautiful things, but it's not a quick process. And putting it back up the other way, I mean, that's just more helpful if there's two people. But that's it, okay? That is my main negative of the car. And that's the Spyder. Clearly the Boxster isn't like that, but everything else about this car is properly jaw-dropping. So let's just very quickly talk about the external aesthetics, and we'll start off with the rear end, I think. Now I just think the back of this car is spectacular, but it's what's inside the back of the car. So the normal 718 has the 4-pot Boxer engine, and obviously it was bemoaned from the start because they got rid of the old 6-cylinder horizontally opposed engine. This has got a 4-litre flat 6, and it's actually a derivative from the Carrera S engine, not a detuned GT3 engine. Apparently that just helps bring the price down a little bit. We'll talk more about price later. And I know that was done in the old Cayman GT4, but never available in the soft top variant, if you like. But now 718 Spyder and 718 GT4 both have that flat 6 engine, and it's now also going to be available in the Boxster and the Cayman versions, so you don't have to go all the way to Spyder or GT4 to get access to that flat 6, because it is an epic soundtrack. I love the exhausts here. I think they look absolutely fantastic. Very aggressive diffuser, lovely kind of duck spoiler. Just the rear end of the car just looks amazing, and the soundtrack coming from that exhaust is quite sensational. Front of the car is pretty good as well. Now clearly the front end of the car has an awful lot of family traits with 718, but it has a far more aggressive splitter on the front with the big Spyder logo there. Bigger intakes here, it's just wider, meaner, more aggressive looking. The other thing about the car, much of the suspension components are taken from the GT3, but it also sits much lower than a standard 718, so it's some 30mm lower, and that just gives it a really mean stance. But the spec on the inside of this car is absolutely beautiful. Now normally I'd sit in a car to talk to you about the interior, but luckily, because this is a convertible, I can just stand here and you get the best view. The spec, this beautiful kind of maroon leather with dark grey Alcantara, is quite stunning. But there are things I love about the car. Now, I'm guessing certainly the Porsches I've driven recently, they've all got the kind of touch screen, haptic feedback type displays, but this is still, you know, the old technology, if you like, now. So there's lots of buttons in here. You look at that console, that's what you used to see in things like Macan and Cayenne, and I really like that. It is, I'm not going to use the word, yes, I'm going to use the word analog. There's buttons to press. I love the fact that this steering wheel has no buttons on it whatsoever. There's not a Sport or Sport Plus option in this car. It's just in Sport all the time. And I just think that's so simple, and we get so much clutter on modern day steering wheels. That's just all about the driving. It's shot in a beautiful Alcantara, and then these seats are quite an expensive option, but they are beautiful. However, if you've got a dodgy back, probably maybe not something you would expect, because you can't move the back. They are fixed in that position. And you know, I've done a fair amount of time in the car, and they have been pretty comfortable. They are so supportive, and I just think they look incredible. It's probably, as you know, someone who buys one of these as close to a 918 Spyder as you're going to get the seats from it. But the most important thing about this car is, yes, down there are 3 pedals, and here there is a lovely manual 6-speed transmission, and that's what makes this car so special. I read somewhere recently on a review of a supercar, oh, you couldn't have a manual gearbox and you wouldn't be able to change gears fast enough. Well, this is a 420 PS car, and believe me, that gearbox turns this into such an engaging drive, way more than, dare I say it, even a PDK could, because you can't get this in a PDK. The Spyder and the GT4 do not come with a PDK option. They are manual only, and long may that continue. Don't get me wrong, Porsche PDK gearboxes are incredible, but that just turns this car into an ultimate driver's car, and that's what we're going to do next. We're going to take this out and do some proper driving, because it's really very, very special. It's good to be alive. A glorious cabin to sit in. But the very first 2 things you do whenever you get in this car, and therefore they should just be on all the time, is down on these lovely proper buttons. There is the noisy exhaust button, just changes the tone, and then there's also the auto blip button, which does rev matching blips for you on the downshift. Now, the pedals are perfectly spaced for heel and towing, and I love heel and towing, and I would like to think of myself as being quite good at heel and towing, but I'm not as good as the Porsche engineers are in terms of engineering the perfect blip on the downshift. And believe me, auto blip, auto rev matching in this car is just wicked. So there we are now set for driving. And the first thing to say is the driving position is so good. These seats are mega supportive. As I've mentioned already, I think they might cause a few people some back problems, but everything else is lovely. You can get them quite low in the car, so I feel like I'm sat down really low, and I've just got a very driver-focused environment. I've got 3 big dials in front of me, a big rev counter in the middle with a digital speedo, an analog speedo on the left, which to be honest is completely pointless because I never look at it anyway, and then there's a screen on the right which can change its function depending on what you're doing. It can show your nav. It's got this gear change assist at the moment, which is like shift up lights. But if we just, there's a rev match, and the symphony that comes out the back of this car is just delicious. See, that was the car doing that. I can't hold my hand up on that one. So where do we start with the driving experience? Well, let's start with the gearbox. You come into a corner like this, the brakes are ceramic, absolutely sensational, but it's the front end of the car is so sharp. And the traction out the corner and the noise. Oh man, what a good car. Now then, if you read any review of this car, and I mean pretty much any of them, the one thing everybody who's driven this car says is that gearbox, the gearing in it is too long. And I now understand why everybody said that, because the gearing in that gearbox is too long. You really, on a B road like this, you don't need more than the first 3 gears. Apparently, I read this, that you can do 80 miles an hour in 3rd gear. So you just don't need them, and that's such a shame for me, because the fun and the joy of this car is changing gear. It's the thing that gives you that engagement, that interaction with the car, that connection that manual cars give you. And the problem is, because the gears are so long, you don't actually get a chance to change gear that much. You can try happily on a B road, drive around in 3rd gear, maybe 2nd, and just change between the 2. So I think that's a bit of a shame. If you shorten the gear ratios together, you would get a far more engaging gear changing experience. Now then, next thing to talk about is steering. It's so sharp and direct. The front end geometry on the car, I'm no expert in those things. All I know is when I get in a car that has a really nice steering setup, and that's what the 718 Spyder has. The steering feel, the feedback it gives you through the whole car, but specifically into your hands, is so informative. You can feel every bump, every little imperfection in the road surface, and when you actually input into the car, it literally is fantastically sharp, but not so sharp as to unbalance or unsettle the car. Now the suspension setup is reasonably firm. There is a damper stiffening button just down here. I have tried it, but to be honest, on the public road I would probably never use it. It's just too harsh and too firm a ride. On a track day, absolutely, I would definitely put it in there, but on the public road it's just a bit too firm for me, a bit too bumpy. I like a compliant car. I like a bit of stiffness, but man, this car's so good. But I think for me, when you engage the firmer damper setting on a bumpy road like this, it's just that little bit too harsh. into a little bit of a secret. I've always been a big fan of the 718. It was one of the first kind, it was certainly the first Porsche I drove on the channel. I remember going to Silverstone, and even though it had a flat 4 and everyone moaned about what it sounded like, it just sounded to me different. It didn't have the howl of the flat 6 of the previous generation Boxster for sure, but it sounded all right, and the performance, the basic Boxster came and had 300 brake, the S 350 brake. It was sensational, brilliant car. So I've never really had a major problem with the flat 4 Boxster. However, when you get back into a flat 6, you kind of remember just what all the fuss was about, because they are brilliant things. I mean, who doesn't want that? And then that auto blip, oh. For me, it's the noise when you go up into the gear, that growling flat 6 comes into play. This is a lovely little corner, this. It's quite technical. So you've got of adverse cameras there. You're going downhill into it on the brakes, and then just the front of the car just goes round. And then you can power out, just being unsettled a little bit there by bumps in the tarmac, but it just goes, yeah, whatever, come at me. Now then, calm myself down. Let me just talk about manual gearboxes. Please, performance car manufacturers, Porsche, you kind of get it. You did the 911R with a manual box. You've done the GT4, now you've done the new GT4 718 and the Spyder with a manual box. Just do manual boxes, people. Yes, flappy paddle for some people, but honestly, if you want to produce drivers' cars, if you want to give the driver the control, the feeling that they're actually doing the work, stick a manual gearbox in a car. It makes such a difference. No matter how good a flappy paddle gearbox can be, it's never as engaging as literally swapping the cogs yourself. And I mean, that was a second to first down change. Didn't really need to do that. But nothing can beat it. So then, what are my final impressions of the 718 Spyder? I really want one. Roger Bailey, I hate you, because you own one. Honestly, this is one of the most pleasurable cars to drive that I've experienced. It's super quick, it sounds incredible, the gearbox is sensational, the steering feel and the poise and balance the car has, the confidence it inspires is just next level. Internally, the cabin is beautiful. I haven't even mentioned the Burmester Hi-Fi, which is a massively expensive option, but that just sounds absolutely brilliant. All the tech's in here. You've got Apple CarPlay. It's lovely. And actually, I really like the fact it's got buttons. We don't need all of this kind of piano black, soulless touchscreen stuff. Give me buttons like this. It's lovely. It's not until you don't appreciate what you've got until it's not there anymore. You know, it used to be moan buttons. Oh, they're so old-fashioned. They're lovely. We really do need more buttons in cars and less touch screens. Smartphone, touch screen, brilliant. I don't want buttons on my smartphone, but I want buttons in my car. And I want a manual gearbox like that in my car, because when you rev to 8,000 RPM, it's just the driving experience that I want from a car. The other big thing that I hate about Porsches is, and it's all because of Jeremy Clarkson, you know, oh, a Porsche Boxster is for someone who can't afford to buy a 911. That is the most utterly rubbish comment in the history of motoring journalism. They are totally different cars. This is mid-engine, a 911 is rear-engine. They're different cars, different driving feel, totally different. This thing, I think this is one of the best cars Porsche make. For driving engagement, it's not the fastest. You might argue it's not the best looking, although it's pretty close. But in terms of driving dynamics, driving engagement, that visceral thing that you want from a great driver's car, this thing delivers it in spades. It is gorgeous, sensational. My favourite gear change again. We pop round here, into third, into second, into the nose, into the apex, on the power. Awesome. Porsche GB, thank you very much for just tempting me. Oh, if only. But guys, I hope you've enjoyed this one. I'd like to thank my mate, by the way, Rick the Spud, because he helped me with all my filming. I will put his Instagram details below. Please give him a follow. He's a super guy. But I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have done so, please give me a thumbs up. Comments below are always welcome, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to Petrol for plenty more content to come. And from the simply stunning seat of the Porsche 718 Spyder, I'll see you on the next film, guys, but you take care. Drive safe.